Hello friends, in today's video we're going to be showing you how to both capture and edit a low light iPhone RAW image with ON1 Photo RAW 2023. Low light scenes are one of the most challenging scenes for an iPhone. For our camera app, we're going to be using Total RAW Camera, which is available in the App Store. This app is optimized for low light RAW shooting, even if handheld, because it makes intelligent use of the iPhone image stabilization. So let's take a photo of this night scene. What I'd like to capture in this scene was the beautiful Ferris wheel. Unfortunately, the sun had already gone down and there's very little light in the scene. So a few things to note. I've set the shooting mode to RAW. That'll give you the maximum dynamic range for editing. However, shooting RAW is not enough. You have to make sure your ISO is low. So to do that, I've set the exposure mode to manual, where I've set the ISO to 100 to control the noise. Now, because the scene was very dark, the shutter for a decent exposure was set to 1/4, which is slower than ideal. So to be sure, I actually used a monopod to shoot this shot, and that is to limit the camera shake. That would really ruin the image. Note that for this type of scene, it is tough to freeze moving objects. So in low light, it's best to shoot stationary subjects or subjects which don't move very fast. Another interesting to note in this shot is I'm not even using the best quality camera. In fact, I'm using the telephoto camera, which is much poorer in low light than the main camera. Thankfully, it also supports RAW, unlike the wide-angle camera of the iPhone. But what I'd like to show in this demo is you don't need the best camera or the best iPhone to get really good quality shots. So I've intentionally used a worse camera, not just for compositional reasons, but just to show you the kind of quality you can still get no matter what iPhone you have. So once the shot is taken, it will save the file as a DNG file. So the next thing you need to do is to transfer the DNG file, which is the raw file of the iPhone, to your Mac or Windows computer using your preferred transfer method like AirDrop. Now let's process the file in ON1. Alright, so let me open the file now. So here we have the iPhone RAW file. So the first thing to note about this RAW file is if you zoom in, you can see it has very little noise, despite the fact that this is a very dark scene. And that's because of the way we took the shot, wherein we made sure that the ISO is relatively low. Even though we had to increase the shutter speed, we use a monopod or some way to brace the shot. And you can see that as I zoom in, it's a relatively sharp shot. It's not ruined by camera shake. So the next thing to note here is if I use the shadows adjustment, which is what most people would do, the effect isn't really that great because you are applying the shadow adjustment to the whole scene, so it loses a lot of contrast. The way I would edit this image is to use local adjustments to focus our adjustments only on select parts. To go for local adjustments in ON1, you simply have to click on this local tab here, and that brings up these set of sliders which are for local adjustments. The first thing you want to do is to make the selection. So to make the selection, what I'm going to do here is use this perfect brush, which will allow for edge detection. For the settings of the perfect brush, you'd like the color threshold to be around 50% or greater. I find that's the best way to ensure that the perfect brush is responsive. And then what we're going to do here is just make sure there's an overlay. So I'm going to click paint with color. And so I'm going to be focusing my adjustments here on the foreground, which is underexposed. So what we're going to do is just paint over here. And there is some edge detection here, so that's a good thing. Okay, so that's fine. Okay, so now that we have our selection, we can now go back to this right panel here, and you can see that the mask has been created. You can actually view the mask here if you wish, right? So we're focusing our adjustment on this foreground area, and we can now just choose one of the presets here, which is lighten, and that will lighten the exposure just a tad. Of course, we can make adjustments to that as well. Now we don't want to overdo this and make it too bright, so just a little bit of exposure is good, right, to make it more natural. We also still want blacks on our image. to ensure that the image has still a very good contrast. So the next thing we can do here is focus on the highlights area, and some of the lights here are a little bit too overexposed. So what we can do is add another layer by clicking add adjustment. And so let's focus on this light area here, and let's just paint on this. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller here. So I'm just going to make sure to paint with color so I can see where I'm painting. Alright, so that's good enough. This time we're going to darken this selection. Okay, so not too much. So just reduce the lights a little bit more because it's a little bit too distracting. And we can also use the haze adjustment here to make sure that some color is brought into these lights. Okay, so that's looking good. So we can always preview it to compare where we are. So now it's a much more balanced scene, but it doesn't look unnatural. So what else can we do in this scene? So I think one thing we can do here is just to enhance the sharpness of this image. So we can do that via a clarity adjustment. And in ON1, the clarity adjustment is in this effects tab. So let's click on that. So we click on effects, add filter. Let's choose dynamic contrast. And these sliders here will enhance the local contrast in different ways. So there is small, medium, and large. Are you enhancing the local contrast of the large details, the medium details, or the small details? Let's just enhance the local contrast of the large details. See how that looks. You can see it makes the image pop a little bit more. And so let's just go ahead and do that. So that's looking nice. So you can see even though I've enhanced the exposure, the noise is still very well under control, right? Because this was a low ISO image. Okay, the next thing we can do here is enhance the color a little bit more. It looks a little bit too warm for me, so I'm just going to go back to the develop panel here, and you can reduce the white balance here just a little bit. Okay, there, that looks a lot better. Okay, it's not too warm. Then we can also enhance the color. Go back to the effects tab. Let's add a filter, and let's click on color enhancer here. And this will allow us to enhance individual colors. So I'm just going to enhance the oranges here, which are present in the image, the yellows, and I'm going to reduce the saturation of the cooler colors. So I'm just going to reduce the saturation of the blue, the purples, and like so. So that's looking pretty good. Another thing I would like to correct here is there's some flaring from the iPhone. Unfortunately, the iPhone does produce flaring. So we can do that with ON1 as well using the retouch button here. And I'm going to choose what they call is the perfect eraser. Okay, so that's the second button from the left. Okay, and then we can just reduce the flare here. In fact, why don't we just get rid of this ray here, which is also distracting to me. Alright, so that's looking a lot better. And finally, let's add some sharpness and some noise reduction. Even though I think it's already pretty sharp and the noise is pretty under control. But since ON1 already provides AI to do this job, let's just give it a try. So we go back to the develop panel. Let's go to noise and sharpening. And I'm just going to click both here, which will do both sharpening and noise reduction. And it's done, right? So you can see there is some sharpening still that was done here. So we'll just click apply. And there's the final image. Okay, we can actually export this as well. All right, so here was the before and the after. So I hope you see that you can get really impressive night shots even in low light as long as you shoot in RAW and process it correctly with a capable RAW editor like ON1. So do check out the Total RAW camera app on the App Store. It's the easiest app to use for RAW and manual shooting and has a ton of features. Best of all, if you purchase the app, you help support the channel and keep the tutorials coming. Till the next video, happy iPhone RAW shooting, and I'm going to see you in the next one. Bye for now.